Governor Reeves, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. How are you today?
Doing well, just adapting to all of the new changes that we're seeing.
Right. I think everybody in Mississippi could say the same thing.
Right. So just to start off, can you give us an overall feeling? How do you feel about how Mississippians have responded to the recommendations that have been put in place since COVID-19 kind of happened?
Well, obviously, this past weekend, our shelter-in-place order saw its first couple of full days. My thought was that the vast majority of Mississippians, somewhere between 75 and 90%, were complying to the recommendations that we had put in place several weeks ago. I think we saw over the weekend even better compliance, which is critically important as we go into the next couple of weeks. We know that certainly around America, we're going to have some very, very difficult days in the next couple of weeks. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can to mitigate the travesty in our state. We want to do everything that we can that we lessen the pressure on our hospital system. And the best way for that to do that is for individual Mississippians to step up and do what we've asked them to do. Shelter in place. Don't go anywhere. Stay at home unless you absolutely have to, or if you're in essential business that you're able to continue your job. But even so, to do that in a responsible way.
So we saw that the emergency disaster declaration was approved for Mississippi. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means for the state?
Well, it's a big deal. I want to tell you how much I appreciate President Trump and his team signing our and approving our major disaster declaration. It gives us the ability to utilize additional resources. The other thing that it allows us to do, because FEMA and the president have set out their guidelines for Title 32 502F funding, obviously to receive that funding for our National Guardsmen, which is critically important. You've got to reach two thresholds. Number one, you've got to be approved for a major disaster declaration. And then you also have to have at least 2% of all personnel in the Guard actually activated for the purposes of this disaster. We have met those two criteria, and we are working with the feds, with FEMA, with the president. I was on a call with the vice president just a little while ago, and we're looking forward to getting approved for that. And so it's an additional threshold that allows us to provide even additional resources to this fight.
Kind of going into your conversations with the president and some of his people, how have those communications been with him and with FEMA? Is Mississippi going to expect to get what they need from the federal government?
Well, we've been having nearly every other day or daily calls with the coronavirus task force. The president has attended most of them. The vice president has attended virtually all of them. Dr. Burks, the admiral that's in charge of distribution of goods, has been involved most of the time. Pete Gaynor, who is running this operation for FEMA, has been on those calls, and including the one today. We're continuing to push. We're continuing to utilize the supply chain, utilize our traditional suppliers for the things that we need. And so far, we have been successful, albeit due to the work of an awful lot of people. We're continuing to distribute PPEs out to the healthcare workers and out to our first responders. No one is getting as much as they've asked for, but we're hopeful that everyone is getting what they need on a day-to-day basis. And as we continue to get supplies in, and we're expecting a very large shipment here very soon, we're going to continue to make those distributions.
Speaking of people's needs, what is the best way for individuals and businesses to find out about how they can receive financial compensation or get loans for their businesses, and where that's available to them?
Yeah, so the primary programs that are in effect for small businesses are either the initial SBA loans that were provided through our SBA disaster declaration. And then when the Congress passed the third stimulus bill, which was in excess of $2 trillion, they provided an option for small businesses to get an SBA loan through their local financial institution, which would then allow for them potentially to get that loan waived and the repayment of it waived, so as to keep people on the payroll during these challenging times. And so SBA's website is probably the best place to get that information. But also small businesses can speak with their local lender, their local banker, and it is highly likely that they have the access to that information as well.
And I know that the system has been overloaded with so many unemployment claims. Can you give assurances that for those who are seeking unemployment that are waiting or trying to get those claims through, that they're not going to lose out on funds?
Yeah, absolutely. You have my assurance. The fact is, 2 weeks ago, Mississippi had 1,000, slightly less than 1,000 unemployment claims. That was 2 weeks ago. Last week, we had approximately 5,500, so 5.5 times more than the week before. And then on Thursday of this most recent week, it was announced that we had over 30,000 claims in that 1 week alone. So understand that that's a 3,000% increase over a 2 week period. So for all of you that are out there that are thinking about why have I not been able to get through, just imagine if you were working today and your boss came to you tomorrow and said, I'm going to expect you to do 3,000% more work today than you did yesterday. Well, that's just unrealistic. And so every employment security office in America is struggling with the same issues. I will tell you that, and I want everyone to understand this, you are going to get what you deserve. Your claim will be filed based upon the day you were terminated, not based upon the day that somebody answers your call. And so if you are entitled to the money, I can assure you that you are going to get it. Please bear with us. Please be patient. I know it's hard to do in these times. Understand that when we started this several weeks ago, we had a call center which was open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week. Now we have a call center which is open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. We are hiring additional staff. We are putting them on the phone trying to answer your calls. We now will allow you to go through the website at the WIN Job Centers. Used to, you could not go on the WIN Job Centers to file unemployment. Now you can. You've got to go through the website because those WIN Job Centers are closed because of the social distancing requirements. But you can go online and do that. But yes, I can assure you that if you're entitled to benefits, whether they're the traditional unemployment insurance benefits that Mississippi has always paid, or if you're entitled to these additional benefits caused by the Federal Stimulus Act. And I spoke with the Secretary of Labor one day last week, spoke to Secretary Mnuchin, and on our call earlier today, the Treasury Secretary, and they have both assured us if you are entitled to those benefits, you will be paid.
Now, for businesses that are considered essential, are you still encouraging that if they can allow people to work from home to do so?
Absolutely. Every business owner knows better than I do who in their operation is essential, who needs to be in that particular business, and who has the ability to work from home. And I trust Mississippi business owners to make the right decision there. We want to keep contact from person to person at a minimal level to the extent possible. Now, understand that's not possible for everybody. Some of us, by the nature of our job, we have to get up and we have to be there, and we have to be there in person. I couldn't be having this call with you, although I'm doing it from the confines of my office. But I've got to be up and at them, just like so many of our first responders and our healthcare workers, and we're so thankful for the sacrifices that they're making right now for their fellow man. But yes, we want to continue to maintain our social distancing guidelines. We want to make sure we're not gathering in groups of 10 or more for social purposes. We know we have a shelter-in-place order in, and I will tell you, if everybody will adhere to that for the next, what is now less than 2 weeks, I think we can make tremendous progress on slowing the spread of this down and not put the kind of pressure on our healthcare system that could lead to major catastrophe.
Looking towards the end of this fiscal year and the coming fiscal year, have there been any estimates made on what the financial impact in revenue could be? We've seen many years of up revenue numbers, especially this year. Obviously, this is going to to play a part in that. Have there been any estimates so far on what that could look like?
Sarah, I think a lot of people have probably made estimates, and I think several individuals and maybe even groups have sat down and tried to use back of the envelope math. What I would tell you is we don't have enough information at this time to have legitimate numbers. The reality is the difference in where we are today and what is currently a 2-week shelter-in-place order, when compared to what could turn into a 4-week or a 6-week order, that would have a huge impact and huge implications to our economy and ultimately to our revenues. And so what I will tell you is our ability to maintain some semblance of economic activity through the first several weeks of this crisis kept a lot of people employed. The very first week of the unemployment claims, Mississippi's were slightly less than half of the national average in terms of percentage growth increases. And so we were able to mitigate it to a certain extent. That obviously accelerated tremendously into the second week. And this shelter-in-place order, we know, is going to lead to more of that as well. But we think if we continue to act smart and if we can get compliance from all Mississippians, we can flatten this curve and we can get our economy back rolling sooner rather than later.
So another thing that's coming up, obviously, is the voting season. There's been some talk in other states about potential mail-in voting. Is that something that Mississippi would consider, or are we just waiting to see how long this lasts before any decisions are made?
I don't anticipate that mail-in voting is something that will happen in Mississippi. We have delayed several elections. We had a second congressional district runoff for the Republican primary for Congress. We've had a couple of state legislative House seats that are coming up, and we've just delayed those until at this point, I believe, until around late June. I would anticipate that we'll be able to vote in person, and there will not be a necessity to change our election laws.
So the CDC has recommended for some people that are going out in public to wear face masks. Is that a recommendation you would make for Mississippi as well at this time?
Well, I have encouraged Mississippians to adhere to CDC guidelines. I will tell you, I think if you're going to the grocery store, if you're going to Walmart, if you're going to these places that have to remain open because they're providing goods and services, but because of them remaining open by necessity, there are more people in tighter spaces than we would like. So if you're going to the grocery store, you're going to Walmart, I encourage you to wear a mask. That's not something that I have personally put in our executive orders as of yet. The guidelines were just put out by CDC, I think literally over the weekend, maybe even late yesterday. So we're having those conversations with our health professionals. But it's not going to hurt you if you have a mask. If you're going to these places where you know there may be a slightly larger crowds, to go ahead and wear that mask.
Now, of course, the question that everybody wants to know that obviously no one has an answer for is, when is this all going to end? What kind of data points are you guys looking at to kind of mitigate what's been successful, what hasn't, and best ways to flatten the curve so that life can go back to some semblance of normal as soon as possible?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you that we are beginning to get more and more information in. As every day progresses, we have more tests done. We have more data to look at. We are beginning to see, and it certainly seems that our mitigation efforts that we started long ago are actually having an impact. We are seeing some models that are significantly reducing their expectations. But again, it's way too early for us to make a final determination. I've often said, and many people that have watched my political career have said and watched me say, one day does not a trend make, and in revenue collections, 1 month does not a trend make. And so we're not ready to change course based upon the data that we have before us, but there are encouraging signs in the data that we are looking at, and we want to keep being diligent and adhering to those guidelines, adhering to our executive orders for the next couple of weeks, and we'll make a final determination as we progress forward. But you're certainly beginning to see in some of the other parts of the country, the U.S., when you look at the number of cases that we have across the country and the fact that it's been pretty steady and consistent, that right around 50% of all cases in the U.S. is in New York and New Jersey. That doesn't mean that we don't have almost a couple 100,000 cases everywhere else, but they're very concentrated in that Northeast region. of the country. We've got just shy of 2,000 here in Mississippi. We've got the hot spot in New Orleans, which has really concerned us from the get-go. We've been watching and monitoring that very, very closely. Their numbers were way down yesterday, I believe it was. But in talking to some of their officials, it seems like that's probably a reporting issue, specifically because yesterday was Sunday. Sundays are harder, and we've seen downticks in total number of cases on Sundays. That's really more of a lab issue than it is a case issue. And so, when is this going to be over? That's the $50 billion question, or maybe even the $2 trillion question, and not one that we can answer, but we're monitoring it very, very closely.
Right. Well, Governor, I appreciate your time. Thank you for talking with us and for your continued leadership on fighting this pandemic. Thanks for tuning in to Y'all Politics today. We were with Governor Tate Reeves talking a little bit about how coronavirus has impacted Mississippi. We hope you'll stay tuned to what we're doing here. You can go and check our articles online to also stay up to date on any recommendations or executive orders that have been made by the governor. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Sarah Ulmer.